Alright guys, it's time for our morning Ukrainian war update. This is the military summary channel.
And so you're in the military summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And before we start, I would like to tell you that most likely in coming days we're going to see something big, something unbelievable, and something most likely impossible. Most likely the Russian Federation will launch the biggest ever missile and drone attack. This is going to be the biggest attack since the beginning of the special military operation. I believe that Russia may try to use at least 1,000 drones and hundreds of missiles. And most likely Russia will attack energy facilities and energy sector of Ukraine. At least this information was provided by different.
This says Ukrainian channels are warning that Russia is preparing for a massive strike on Ukrainian energy and gas sectors. Is effective until September 17th. See, the Ukraine for the last few weeks has been attacking a lot of Russian oil and natural gas facilities and has in fact set several of them on fire over the last couple of days. One of their major ports up in the Baltic Sea.
For Ukrainian monitors, Ukrainian
going to be raising our gas prices.
That Russia is preparing for a massive strike in Ukraine's energy and gas sectors. So why the Russians are going to do this and why the Russians still haven't done this? Everything is very simple. For example, during the previous 24 hours, another attacks carried out by Ukraine were recorded with drones. And once again, Ukraine attacked military facilities and the most important oil refineries and oil facilities, so energy facilities of the Russian Federation. For example, in this video, we can see how Ukrainians attacked the city of Ufa, which is located in the central part of Russia. As a result of this attack, as you can...
All these drone strikes expose how weak our defense system is here in the United States. If we're not taking a look at this seriously, this stuff could happen to us very easily. Our oil and natural gas facilities are open season. So is our airports and our military defenses and our bases.
You see, the Ufa oil refinery was damaged, really damaged. We can see fire. And
don't think our enemies aren't taking note.
That was not the only strike. According to information we have, another city, another oil refinery was attacked in the vicinity of the city by the name of Uralsky. Here we can't see the drone itself, but here we can see the consequences of Ukrainian attacks. Some construction was damaged, but obviously this construction belongs to a part of a Russian energy facility, energy sector in this part of Russia. So, and these two strikes are not the only strikes that were carried out by the Ukrainians since the beginning of probably summer of 2025. The Ukrainians have already carried out probably hundreds of attacks, and the Russians and Russia suffers huge problems with this. And the most interesting is not just attacks themselves, but the problem for Russian Federation is that Ukrainians are attacking the central part of Russia. This part of Russia, which used to be considered as the most protected part of the Russian Federation. So, when talking about Russians, when talking about the World War III or something like this, the Russians, first of all, first thing that comes to their minds is that they are able to move to the central part of Russia and they will be protected. They will be protected, they will be able to build industry facilities and to continue, let's say, this World War III. But now we see that there is not even a single square kilometer of Russia that can be protected, that is protected from these drones. So at least this is the message that's the...
He says that, but I mean, he didn't even go halfway across Russia. There's the whole eastern part of Russia above China. They still have most of their military equipment split between the east and the west. They're bringing a lot of it out of their storage facilities in the east, though. And it's dwindled down to about 40% capacity there.
Ukrainians are sending to the Russians and to the world. So the question is not a question why the Russians still haven't launched this massive missile drone strike, what the Russians are waiting for. The thing is that most likely the Western intelligence knows for sure that the Russians are going to do this. So that is why the Western countries began their own let's say, special operation, let's call it like this. NATO has launched operational Eastern Sentry to protect the.
It could also be because Poland's airspace was violated this last week on September 10th, the same day that Charlie Kirk was killed in the early morning hours by Russian drones.
Airspace of Poland and the Baltic states following the incident with Russian drones. So during the previous days, Poland was closing their airfields. The Poland launched their air raid siren sounds and many other different things just to test, to practice, to get better before this possible attack. Furthermore, don't forget that there are aircrafts flying along the border with Poland. The airspace have been closed. Lithuania and Estonia have closed their airspace during the joint.
I was watching the video, and Lithuania is actually the only Slavic state that has
now
full
imposed
brigade
restrictions for the duration of the exercises.
trained
Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. Another important incident took place, for example, during the previous nights on the territory of Romania. The sources are saying that Russian drones over Romanian NATO aircraft in the sky. The video shows the city of Tulcea a couple of dozen minutes ago. The Romanian authorities announced a danger to populated areas near the Romanian-Ukrainian border. Messages about the possible fall of objects were sent to residents of the city of Tulcea in Romania near the border with Ukraine. The Romanian Air Force allegedly intercepted a Russian drone over national airspace. So this is Romanian Air Force F-16 did not shoot down Russian drone. There were articles, and of course.
Guys, this is just therapy for me now. Now this is just therapy. Mom, therapy is when you go to a therapist and you.
We have the video of Romanian F-16 flying in the sky. So as we can see, that what does it mean? The Western countries are carrying out practicing along the border with F-16s with the purpose to track Russian drones. Maybe that's even weren't launched by Russia, but maybe they were launched even by Ukraine, but it doesn't matter. The most important is to have additional practice to learn how to bring down Russian drones. And we see that all these things the Western countries are doing just with one reason, one purpose. At some point to start helping Ukraine to bring down Russian drones and missiles. And most likely during this massive drone and missile attack that is going to happen during the next several days, the Western countries, Romania and NATO will help Ukrainians to bring Russian drones and missiles down. And
that is an escalatory step that we should not be pushing for. This is not our war. We need to quit sending money to the Ukrainian Nazis. I'll do a future video where I show you the Ukrainian symbolism on their battalion flags versus the Nazi symbolism from World War II. And it will shock you.
So this is going to be another round of escalation. So, and this is another reason why the Russians haven't launched their attack yet, because they're waiting.
In that video, I will also show you guys how over 10 million rounds of ammunition and 10,000 guns that we sent the Ukrainian Azov battalion specifically ended up in the Palestinian hands for the October 7th attack on Israel.
I think when the drills are ended, and maybe as soon as they are ended, they will try to attack. Who knows? At the same time, we got report that Poland has begun closing all rail borders crossing with Belarus. So another important thing, in my opinion, that most likely, as we discussed several days ago, after the end of these military drills, the Russian Federation will not remove their forces from the territory of Belarus, because as for now, it is very dangerous to remove forces from the territory of Belarus. The Russians will try to keep their forces on the territory of Belarus, not, let's say, with the purpose to occupy the territory of Belarus. The reason of Russians is to stay as close as possible to the Kaliningrad region. They need to keep their forces somewhere here, because if something goes wrong, they need to be very close to this Kaliningrad region with the purpose probably to stabilize the situation, or at least not to allow the Western countries to make any sabotage or any, let's say, activity in the direction of this region.
Kaliningrad is one of their biggest ports
so the
they've got
situation remains
in the Baltic Sea.
As we can see, anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next. But obviously, the next massive missile and drone attack carried out by the Russians is going to be very, very interesting, and the most important. This is going to be a very dangerous situation because most likely the Western countries will begin attacking and destroying Russian drones at least above the territory of the western part of Ukraine. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on the ground. The most important updates of the previous...
Zaporizhia regions where one of the nuclear power plants that's left in Ukraine is at. And over the last 6 months, the Russians have been slowly making headway up around the tributary that's by the nuclear power plant. They had broken through early in the war and been pushed back. They'd almost taken Zaporizhia in the beginning of the war.
Nights are coming from the territory of the city by the name of Stepnogorsk. As you can see, we have changes on the ground. During the previous 12 hours, pro-Ukrainian resources but
while that may look like quite a bit, is a couple square kilometers. America is like over 1 trillion square kilometers. Like the amount of area that they're taking, you're talking about a couple city blocks at a time.
This video where we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians in different parts of the Stepnogorsk region. And
see, look at these Luftwaffe 422. These are the Ukrainian symbols. This is a Ukrainian video. I didn't even have to go very far, to show you what I'm talking about.
Lots of explosions, lots of attacks. Ukrainians were attacking Russian soldiers, buildings, temporary deployment points, and many other things. And one of the episodes was recorded exactly in this point, which means that the Russians launched their major offensive operation with the purpose to establish complete control over the city by the name of Stepnogorsk.
It's just so prevalent in their military.
It's become clear what the Russians are trying to achieve. Of course, the main task of the armed force of the Russian Federation most likely
we'll do an
is
overview,
to get these
and I'll show you
so this is what the Russians will
why
try
Ukraine
to achieve.
is actually
So
the
why
aggressor
this
in
red
this
line?
war.
Why not the inside city of Primorsk? Why not moving further in the direction of Grigorovka and in the direction of the city of Zaporozhye?
That does not
Everything
mean
is
that I
simple.
believe the Russians
You know that
should be
this
able
is
to
the
take
beginning of the special
Ukraine.
operation. More
That's only
precisely
for
called
American
since the
strategic
beginning or
interests.
since the end of
It's very little to do with what's
the
right or
Russians
wrong.
changed their tactics when they were attacking different trenches and fortifications. So if you remember, we used to see the same story in the Avdiivka direction after the fall of Avdiivka. Now we can see the same story in the Zaporozhye direction. So the Russians' goal is to establish complete control over this dense network of the fortifications. As you can see, that lays between the city of Stepnogorsk, all these trenches, yellow lines, till the city of Orekhov. So there are 100.
The yellow line is actually a anti-tank ditch. So those are ditches that are able to stop tanks from being able to move through. They have defense fortifications all around those that you can see. They're the drawn boxes.
Of strongholds that the Russians are trying to take under control.
Each one of those
and
is the company's
if
stronghold.
Russians begin offensive operation from the south in the northern direction, they would be defeated with the heaviest losses ever. But if the Russians are able to take under complete control the city of Stepnogorsk until the lines, as we discussed a minute ago, the Russians in this case will have possibility to move from the west in the east, eastern direction, and to take every single stronghold and trench from the west to the east until the city of Orekhov itself. So they will move from the west in the eastern direction, and obviously in this case they have more chances. If they take this dense network of the fortifications under control, they will have a very strong positions because the Ukrainians will not be able to counterattack Russians from the north and the southern direction due to this gap, due to these fields and very huge distance between Ukrainian strongholds and Russian strongholds. And Russians will have a very strong dense network of the fortifications. So the same thing, by the way, we can see right now in the eastern Zaporozhye direction. As you can see, the Russians are doing the same. The Russians are attacking these strongholds between the cities of Uspenovka, Poltavka, Velika Mikhailovka, and Podkrovka, not from the south to the north, but the Russians are moving from the east in the western direction. So here we can see the same story in this direction, and here we can see the use of these tactics in this area as well. So this is like a live example.
Do this 7 minutes a day until the middle of October. We start on Monday, September 15th. In a week, you'll feel better.
Of how the Russians are taking these trenches on the complete control one by one. So this means that something like this is going to happen in this area in coming days, maybe months. Now let's move to the Pokrovsk direction. During the previous 24 hours, nothing was recorded. The Russians published several videos of how they were bombing and attacking temporary deployment points of the 79th Sermon-Bayat Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine. No changes on the ground. The pro-Ukrainian resources continue claiming and stating that the Ukrainians continue their counterattacks with the purpose to force the Russians.
Each time the Ukrainians do these counterattacks, they sacrifice thousands upon thousands of lives to hold the ground for a few days. A couple months back, up in the Sumy region, one of the Ukrainian officers on the ground said, "We have held the center of this city, but for how much longer I do not know. And the situation is dire, and it is urgent." It was 48 hours later that they had to surrender that section, and they lost 3,000 men holding it for less than 48 hours. They had put more men in harm's way instead of being willing to lose an inch of ground. And this is all because he had decided he was going to do an offensive into Russia. There hadn't even been a front opened on that side of the war.
To fall back, the pro-Ukraine resources reported that they managed to bring here a lot of very powerful FPV drone crews that control the entire sky. But despite all these talks, all these means that Ukrainians use, we still see that they haven't managed to cut these breakthrough pockets. We still see that the Russians hold their positions, but of course, let's wait and see what is going to be next. But obviously, now we can say for sure that the Russians did their job they were tasked for, to force the Ukrainians to use as many as possible units in this area, while the Russians were advancing on different directions, like the Zaporozhye direction, like the city of Konstantinovka, and of course the city of Kupiansk. Now let's talk about the Konstantinovka direction, and according to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians eliminated the pockets to the southeast of the city. If you remember, yesterday we were talking about this pocket, that the pocket was caught and cordoned by the Russians. At least this information was provided by different neutral mappers. Furthermore, we had a video where we can see how Russians entered the southeastern part of the city of Konstantinovka. So everything tells us that the major battle for the city has begun. And we were waiting when the Russians will eliminate this pocket completely, and when the
Russians have been using a large group of motorcycles as a part of the core of their advancing.
So, and today we colored this territory because Ukrainians published this video where we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians in different parts of this area.
This drone warfare is costing 80% of the casualties on the battlefield.
Took place to the south, on the southern part of this huge forest. Another attack took place to the east of this forest. Based on this video and based on these episodes, we came to the conclusion that most likely the pocket was eliminated. Maybe the pocket itself hasn't been eliminated, but obviously the pocket was cut into several pieces, many pieces, and now the Russians, maybe there are still some pockets of resistance from the Ukrainian side, but one thing is clear, that it's just a matter of time when probably the entire territory will be under complete control. For now, we believe there are still some pockets of resistance and Ukrainian groups that are trying to escape this encirclement. It will take up to 2-3 days to finish the clearing operation, and then the Russians will maintain the lines and continue offensive operation towards the villages of Pleshevka, Ivanopolye, and they will get the southern and the southeastern outskirts of the city of Konstantinovka itself. The battle for this area is going to start very soon. And that's it for...
Thank you guys. for watching.